Welcome to the Boroondara Creative Network. My name is Bridget and I'm from Boroondara Arts. I acknowledge the traditional owners as the original custodians of this land, including the Wurundjeri people from the northern part of our city, and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and to the elders from other communities who may be viewing this today. Today we're excited to present this online creative network session to you with guest speaker Janine Hendry from the Guild of Objects. The Guild of Objects do some amazing work in mentoring artists and providing advice to them on how they can generate an income from their artistic practice. In today's session, Janine will be discussing the design theory and how you can apply it to your projects and the creative process. After this video, you're invited to continue the conversation with Janine and others from the network. The Guild of Objects and Boroondara Arts will be hosting an online conversation on Saturday the 13th of June from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. For more information about how you can join, please email me at arts@boroondara.vic.gov.au. So enjoy the presentation and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Hello, my name's Janine Hendry and I'm from the Guild of Objects in Melbourne, and I'm going to talk to you about design thinking and how we as creatives can use design thinking to inform the creative process. We're going to talk about what design thinking actually is, and importantly what it isn't. We'll look at the difference between design thinking, strategic thinking and lateral thinking, because most of us are actually taught how to undertake lateral thinking and strategic thinking. And even when we work in the design fields, we're often not really clear as to what the design thinking process is. So we'll talk about what design thinking is, what it isn't, and then I'm going to take you through the process as to how you can actually start thinking like a designer. And for many of you in the creative industries, you're already using design thinking processes. So hopefully by engaging with the process, by engaging with this, you'll start to be able to build a format around what you already do so that you can indeed become much more efficient in it. So what is design thinking? We often think about it or refer to it as thinking outside the box. When we consider how we've been taught to problem solve, it's very much a situation of, I've got a problem, here's a solution, what is the quickest way to solving that problem? Without necessarily solving the problem in the most effective way or in a manner which has, I guess, longer lasting results. So if we look at strategic thinking as being linear in nature, then design thinking is almost cylindrical in nature. It goes round and round and round while we search for the best possible solution for the problem at hand. And often in design thinking and the design thinking process, we will start the process by actually framing what the problem is, or reframing what the problem is, to help us in the process of coming up with what is indeed the best possible solution. So design thinking, as I said, is cylindrical in nature. We don't take a linear approach to finding the answer. But the most important thing about design thinking that sets us apart from strategic thinking or lateral thinking or linear thinking is that design thinking is always human-centered. So we always think about what are the human-centered needs in relation to the problem that we have at hand, and how then are we going to use design thinking to solve those very human-centered needs. So we focus on people, we focus on emotion, and importantly we focus on feeling. So how does design thinking work in terms of you as creatives? And we have to recognise that often great ideas are not necessarily new ideas. Great ideas often emerge when we start to put together a series of ideas that can come from quite disparate points. And when we think about design thinking, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring in tools that we may have, for example, from the non-creative aspects of our lives to help us actually solve what is ostensibly a design or a creative-based problem. So it is a fairly amazing technique to use in the creative sectors. And as I said earlier, you're probably going to find that you're already using a lot of design thinking, but you perhaps don't have the framework around it to support what you actually do. So how is it that we go about design thinking? What's the structure? What do we do? And there is a process. And there are 5 steps in the process. The first stage is always to empathise. Empathy is the critical point for understanding design thinking. And empathy is about getting to know the user and understanding what their needs actually are. Now, bear in mind that it's often difficult for people to articulate their needs. And often, we all know this from personal experience, that often what we say we want is not actually what we want. So you're going to have to understand what true empathy really is and use that empathy to really understand what the needs and the wants are of your users. The stage after empathy, the second stage, is what we refer to as the define stage. And this is really dedicating to define what the problem is. Because similarly to the first stage, i.e., what people say is often, or in some cases, not always what they want. So we've got to go beyond that. Secondly, in the define stage, what we think is the problem may not indeed necessarily be the problem. So the second stage is always defining the problem, looking at the information that you gained from the empathy stage, asking yourself questions. What are the difficulties and barriers that our users might be coming up against? What makes sense to them? What is the big user problem that we actually have? And how can we frame the problem around the user, around the person? Once you've formulated your problem, we move on to stage 3, which is what we refer to in design thinking as the ideate stage. And that's where you've got a solid understanding of what the users want, a clear and concise problem definition. We start then to look at working on potential solutions. And this is the point where creativity happens. And what I always suggest at this stage is you've got to be prepared to throw everything into the box, even stuff that may not necessarily, or you may think, is not necessarily going to solve the problem here. Throw it into the box. Because remember what I said before? That when we think about design thinking and we think about solving problems, then new ideas are usually a combination of existing ideas. So if we throw everything we've got into the box, you never know where you might find the solution. The other thing when we're looking at the ideate stage, where we're trying to find potential solutions, is to consider solutions from other sources, from non-design sources. Is there an engineering solution? Is there a human resources solution? Is there a mathematical or a science-based solution? This particular stage is where you've got to really look at your creativity, pull your creativity out, and look at ideas that are going to come from a wide variety of sources, because that's where the magic's happened and that's where you're likely to get the best responses. We then move on to prototyping, which is about developing a prototype i.e. focusing on what your solution to the problem is going to be. Now, remember, there might be more than one solution. You might move down the path of exploring a solution and realise, hey, it's not going to work, so move somewhere else. And from prototyping, we'll move into testing. Testing's where you're putting your solution out there, but it's rarely the end of the process, even though we argue that it's stage 5, because you're going to, during the testing phase, gather insights which you'll no doubt put into your solution to constantly improve and evaluate your solutions. So there are the 5 stages of design thinking, and they're the stages that you will apply to your creative process. So getting started, you're gathering insights, you're observing, you're using empathy to talk to people, interview people, connect with people on any way you can to identify what the real problems are. You're going to start building prototypes. They can be scrappy to start with, but you're going to build prototypes, and the input into those prototypes is going to come from whatever sources are available to you. Start to look around, start to see how other people, other organisations, other divisions in an organisation, other artists, other creatives actually solve problems. Yeah, so you might be a visual artist. Start looking and seeing how artists that perhaps are working in dance or music are solving their problems, and can you use some of those same techniques? Turn your problems into questions. Okay, when you're presented with a problem, we always have the urge to try and solve that problem. So start to turn your problems into questions and shift your mindset. By shifting your mindset, you'll be in a better position to look to other sources to glean solutions, or glean solutions that you can adapt to the issue that you have at hand. And use all the research you can gather to inform both past, present and future. What happened in the past, what's happening now, and hey, what can be the potential for the future? So let me sum up. Design thinking is essentially a problem-solving approach that's specific to design, and it's specific to the creative sectors. It's fundamentally based on understanding human-centered needs. So any design thinking that you do is really, it's got to start from the position of what are the human-centered needs? What are the people's needs in this particular project, and how am I going to reframe what I think is a problem to find the solutions to answer those questions? It's a cyclical or circular approach. It's not a linear approach, so you're going to go back and forward. I like to think of design thinking as it's a bit like a labyrinth and walking through a labyrinth where you walk down some paths and you might come to a dead end. You walk down other paths and gosh, it's really interesting. You think you're getting somewhere, but maybe you're not, and you've got to walk back. So think of it like that. Think of your questions, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks to specifically answer any questions that you have. Thanks for staying with me for this long. Bye for now.